What effect does a dementia diagnosis have on your estate planning? Hi, Nancy Beaubear here with Agape and NEXsteps. This week I wanted to take a look at what happens when someone is diagnosed with dementia. As a society, we're living longer and longer lives now. Although our bodies are staying healthy, we are having an increased number of dementia diagnoses simply because we don't yet know how to treat dementia. And as we age, there are different things that happen in our brain that can cause eventual incapacity. But there is a big difference between a medical diagnosis and a legal diagnosis of dementia. Dementia is a progressive disease in nearly every case. What that means is that it is a gradual decline. So when somebody is diagnosed with dementia, it doesn't mean that they have immediately lost capacity. It doesn't mean that they're not capable of still functioning. Someone who is diagnosed with dementia may still be able to make very, very prudent decisions on day-to-day activities, where they want to live, things that they want to do. They may still be able to be fully cognizant of managing bank accounts and paying bills. But over time, as the dementia progresses, those functions will decline in their ability. So here's where a lot of the problem stems. When people hear about a dementia diagnosis, they kind of almost immediately panic. Not just the person who has been diagnosed, but also the family members. Obviously, you want to make sure that your loved one is getting proper care, that they're not at risk. And often what that means is that the family overreacts and they try to take over too much too soon, removing the independence of the adult with the dementia diagnosis. Now stop and think about how you would react if you were the person who is diagnosed with dementia. First of all, you're probably going to be panicking because you do understand that what that diagnosis means is that at some point you will become incapable of making those day-to-day decisions on your own for yourself. And none of us likes to lose that independence, and none of us likes to lose that capacity. I've had several friends and relatives who have had dementia, and their reaction varies. There was one woman, she was quite emotional about it, and when she stopped to think about it, she would often cry, and she would say things like, "I'm losing my mind and I can't do anything about it." I know another friend who, when she was diagnosed and as she identified that she was losing capacity, she was much less vocal publicly about how she felt about that. Instead of declaring that she was losing her mind, she would just go off on her own and silently cry. So there's all those emotional elements to somebody who is losing capacity as well. So it's important as family members that you don't overreact and that you make sure that you are encouraging your loved one as much as possible for as long as possible to have some measure of independence. But let's get back to how this works into your estate planning. Again, the family often overreacts. They think that a diagnosis of dementia instantly means that their loved one can no longer take care of anything. They can't pay a bill. They can't make their own medical decisions. And keep in mind that dementia is a medical diagnosis, but legally, it is something completely different. So although a medical diagnosis may say that your loved one has dementia, the legal boundaries around that are very clear. That is why, in most cases, you will require a doctor's signature or maybe two healthcare providers' signatures to determine if somebody still has capacity or not. Sometimes, granted, that can become a little bit frustrating because you know your loved one more than the medical profession does. And you may see that there are huge gaps that could potentially endanger your loved one. But the legal diagnosis still might be that they have capacity. Part of the legal diagnosis is, do they understand the repercussions of what they're doing? Do they know how to respond? And most people who have dementia do have moments throughout the day that they're fine. In fact, there's a phrase called sundowning. So a lot of people with dementia will be better in the morning, and as the day progresses and they become more tired and more stressed and more strained, their dementia will appear to become worse. So the person with the dementia diagnosis is somewhat protected because of the legal definition of dementia, protecting them from having their independence taken too soon. But what happens if you haven't created your estate documents? Well, then we've got a whole different ball of wax. Sometimes dementia can advance very, very rapidly. There's one instance where there was a dementia diagnosis, and within 6 months, the parent had lost capacity and were deemed by a lawyer and a medical professional that they did not understand the implications, and they were no longer able to create a will or a power of attorney document. And that can create huge complications. If those documents are not in place prior to having the legal definition of incapacity confirmed, then your loved one won't be able to make those documents. And the family may end up having to go to court to apply for trusteeship, guardianship. The phrases differ in different jurisdictions. But in order to make those responsible decisions on behalf of your loved one, you may have to go to court. But beyond that, if there's no will, there's no will. That means that your loved one will die intestate. And again, you will have to apply to the courts for trusteeship, administration of your loved one's estate. So it's really important, not just for people with a dementia diagnosis, but for all of us to be well aware that life can change in a heartbeat. Make sure that you have those documents created. Make sure that you have them prepared. I'm a certified executor advisor. What I do is I help people make sure that their plans are in place. I identify those gaps between planning and administration of the estate. So if you have any questions, if you'd like a little bit of help with your planning, please reach out and I'd be happy to help you. As always, I've got an article on my website. It goes into more detail about this whole issue of dementia and capacity. The link is in the description box. Please hop over and take a read. And I'd love to hear your comments and your thoughts on it. Thanks very much for joining me this week. I look forward to sharing more with you next time. Bye for now.